Okay, great. So thank you everybody for coming. Today we're joined by Alex Freeman from Cambridge, and I'm just reading her bio here. And as we were talking just before the recording started, that quite an interesting background in at the BBC, 16-year-long career at the BBC, with highlights including Walking with Bees and Trust Me, I'm a Doctor. She currently works at the Winton Centre for Risk and Evidence Communication, so not very relevant at the time, but for the time being. I, of course, being facetious, she's swept off her feet, so we're really grateful that she has made time today to come and talk to us about her side project, which is a really important project, and it's endorsed by the UKRN as well as other initiatives. And it's going to be a really useful tool, and I think a very future-proof model for how we disseminate our research. So I am really thrilled to have Alex give a talk today. So I'll stop waffling on. Alex, do you want to take over, and I will mute myself?
Lovely, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So it's slightly odd for me to be presenting this way and not being able to see you and not being able to hear you. So apologies for the fact that I may go through things quite fast, but I'll try and leave plenty of time for questions at the end, because that's where we might have the much more interesting discussion. But as Sam said, my background, I did a PhD, but then I went straight into the BBC, and I came back to academia, as it were, at the end of 2016, going to Cambridge to run this Centre for Risk and Evidence Communication. And I have to say, when I first started leading a team of postdocs, I was really shocked at the way that scientific publishing works these days. And it seemed to me that so many of the things that I had heard about, you know, the reproducibility crisis, all this kind of stuff, and the problems with access, which, you know, I'd suffered at the BBC, where we didn't have subscriptions to journals. So all these problems with open access, reproducibility, they all, to me, seem to boil down to the way that we share our research. And in fact, the way that we share our research is driving, to quite a large extent, the way that we do our work. And so it seems to me that so much of science and the future of science and the way we work and the sorts of things that we work on are driven by the wrong incentives. And it's probably not news to you, but it very much struck me, possibly because I was coming from the outside, and it made me think that there has to be a better way of doing this, and that it is actually so fundamentally important. And I think the current COVID crisis is really highlighting that, and the way that people are having to share and disseminate information now that's fast and that is open to peer review. So to start with, what's wrong with the current system? Well, I've never yet walked into a room of people that think there's nothing wrong with the current publishing system. But there are sort of a couple of things that I'll focus on. So the obvious thing is access. And as I said, everybody talks about the fact that it's expensive. Not so many people talk about the fact that it's so English language dominated, but it's generally a quite exclusive community, those who have access to scientific publishing. And as we probably all realise, it's really difficult to find things. I'm just at the end of a systematic review of something, and as any of you who've done that will know, it's desperately painful to do a systematic review. And, you know, a meta-analysis, trying to extract data, it's a nightmare. It really shouldn't be. This is the 21st century. And there's a lot more besides that. And I think we'll talk about some of the other aspects. And one of these is really getting to the fundamental problem, because I think it is more than just access. So the scientific process, as I see it, naturally comes in a kind of series of steps, one after the other. And each of these steps requires quite different skills and quite different resources. And what we're doing at the point where we publish a paper and go through scientific publishing is forcing people to get right to the end of this process before sharing it with anybody. And that's causing so many problems. It's forcing people to retrospectively fit a linear narrative to this non-linear process that we all go through. It's forcing people to only publish when they've got a nice story. And this was a phrase that I heard my postdocs talking about, saying, you know, we've got to find the story in our data. What is the story that we can publish? And I know that you'll all be very aware of what that drives us towards, these lovely questionable research practices that are, you know, trying to make a story out of our data. The fact that we tend to publish positive results, in quotes, positive results. And so I thought we needed a new structure that reflects the way that we actually do our work. And so this is the structure that I came up with that is the basis of Octopus, this kind of branching structure, where instead of just trying to make a linear story, we're looking at individual aspects of the individual kind of parts of the scientific process. And the idea is that each of these is a publication in its own right. And so we publish these, some people call them micro publications, as we go. And that has so many advantages, I think. It's much faster because obviously you're not waiting till you get to the end, which could be, you know, years of work. And that, the benefit for you is that you're getting instant priority for your work. And the benefit for everybody else is that we're getting faster dissemination of knowledge. Again, think of this, you know, in the current COVID crisis, to just really bring that into sharp sort of relief, what that can do for people. Publishing in smaller publications means that you can publish in smaller author groups. So, for instance, lots more sole authorship or small group authorship. And that has real advantages in being much more meritocratic. So, you know, specialists who are particularly designing protocols, or statisticians doing analyses, or people who come up with lots of hypotheses and don't have the huge resources, say, that might be needed to collect data on those hypotheses, or people who are really insightful about how this work could be applied, perhaps in a different field. Those people can publish these micro publications on their own or with small groups, as I say, and get recognition for it. And of course, on the flip side of that, accountability. It's clear who's doing what work. And if there's a problem with one bit, the analysis, the data collection, whatever, it's clear where that problem was. So you're getting much more recognition for exactly the work that you're doing. And the key thing that I see is that there's no need for this narrative. So it removes a lot of those dangerous incentives. And it also means that you can publish small data sets. You can publish just a hypothesis. And so there's a lot less waste in research. I mean, all of us surely have ideas that we've never been able to pursue, small data sets. All of us could potentially, you know, we probably do a lot more exploratory analyses that we never publish. All of this stuff is really relevant for other people, and it's good for it to be shared. There's no such thing as pointless research, because unless you've done it badly, but I mean, if you're doing good work, it's all worth sharing, whatever you find. And there's another critical part of Octopus, and that is the way that reviews work. And that's the 8th type of publication. You can see why it's called Octopus. Because I think that reviewing and doing a good critique of other people's work is as important a skill as being able to do any of the other kinds of work on that diagram. And so reviews are published attached to any other kind of publication, and they're treated and they're valued in the same way as the other publications. So this structure shows how things are linked together as well, and that's critical within Octopus. When you publish a publication of whatever kind, you have to link it to an existing one. So this is where it differs slightly from similar platforms like F1000 perhaps, in that everything has to be linked to something else to form these branching trees. You can't publish data without publishing a protocol or somebody having published a protocol. You can't publish an analysis without the data being there. And that data, it might be full publication of data in a data repository, or it could be just the descriptives of it, but somewhere that data has to be published. So it's making the structure of science much more obvious, but in a way also imagine doing, a meta-analysis as it shows there on the screen. Now all that data is there in the tree linked to a particular problem. It's much easier to find things. So going back to the review, it's post-publication because I don't want anything to get in the way of fast sharing of research. But I think that also has a lot of other advantages. So publication bias, as we all know, is a real problem. There should be no gatekeepers to putting things in Octopus and sharing them. I think it's really important to value the fact that reviewing is a time-consuming and a skilled task. So when you write a review, it's treated as a publication, and this incentivizes it and stops it being a burdensome task that is often done, without the care and attention it should be given. And I think it encourages collaborative working, because if you've published a method or a hypothesis and then you get reviews back and you can read those reviews, it allows you to reversion that publication. You can even thank the reviewer who pointed out something really crucial and include them as an author on the next version of that publication. Again, that incentivizes the reviewing, but it also just makes it a more collaborative process, and it makes the scientific work better. We're all working now for the common good. It's not so competitive. And crucially, I think also that the reviews then are all open for others to read. It's so often that I am, hearing other people's critiques of papers and thinking, well, gosh, everybody should be hearing this. Here is a statistician telling me that the statistical analysis in this paper is appalling. Well, everybody should know that. Or somebody saying, well, this is brilliant. Everybody should know that, because we've all got different expert perspectives. And that should be available for everybody to see. It shouldn't be hidden. And this is the final sort of really major point that I want to tackle with Octopus, which is how can you tell what's good or who's good? We're not really judging science on the right things. We tend to, everybody knows that the metrics of scientific publishing are not assessments of good science. Again, relating it to my old job, it's the sort of metrics that I would be judged on in the media. How many people are reading my stories? How many people are sharing them? These are not metrics of good science. They're metrics of good storytelling. So I think we really need to think about what we mean by good work and how we can possibly assess that in a relatively simple way. I mean, it's not possible for me to assess things that are even marginally outside of a field I know a lot about. So how can I find people's reliable opinion on that? And so, as well as reviewing and open reviewing, transparent reviewing, Octopus, and here's a screen grab from Octopus as it exists now, has these ratings. You can see over on the far right, a rating system. Now, I realize this might sound quite controversial because, you know, science isn't Amazon or eBay. But I think what is important about ratings is that it allows us to define what we want to take into account as a metric. So I don't know if you can all see on your screens, it's quite small, but it's got 3 different things that you rate a publication on. And those 3 things are different for each type of publication. So this is a method or a protocol. And the ratings that I have decided on would be good metrics for a review for a method are that the details are clear, that the method's original, and that the method provides an appropriate test of the hypothesis. Now, originality might be important for a hypothesis or a method, but it's not important for data. So data would have a different set of 3 ratings, rating criteria. And anybody who's logged into Octopus would be able to publish, to be able to review, and to be able to rate. And so you can see up in the top far right, there's login, and we log in via ORCID. And ORCID are set up to be able to authorize academic or other scientific workers, whether that's in industry or academia. So ORCID's in the appropriate login system. So the important thing about ratings is that we can choose what those criteria are. I've made them up for the first version of Octopus, but we as a scientific community can decide what we think the criteria are. So yeah, as I say, it allows a community consensus on what we think good science means. And it helps us navigate that terrible morass of publications that are out there. How can you tell what's good and what's not? I mean, at the moment we use the heuristics of what journal it's published in, or what place what institution the authors are from. Ratings, I think, if it works, will allow us to have a much more meritocratic rating system of being able to find the good publications. And obviously that's important for individual researchers. And so all of this in Octopus is designed to try and create an incentive structure that works for individual researchers. And the important thing about that, of course, is how it's recorded. So in Octopus, everybody has their own profile page. And here is mine. I'm probably the only person to have published in Octopus at the moment because it's just in a test version. So, but this is what a profile would look like. So it allows you to see my affiliations, my educational background. There's no photo there because I'm trying to help remove as many possible sources of bias. So trying to remove all the biases that come when you see a picture of somebody. You could see my conflicts of interest. Now, those aren't up there at the moment, but imagine a central resource there with all my conflicts of interest. Nice and clear. I don't need to write them every time. Obviously, when I publish, I might want to highlight some, and I'll show you the publication route in a minute. But a central resource with all my conflicts of interest. And then over there on the right, that little pie chart shows what kinds of publication I publish. So what kind of researcher am I? So actually, I'm a very well-rounded publisher, as you can see from this. I've published something of everything. But if I really concentrated, say, on data collection, then you'd see I'd have a large blue section. And if I were looking to hire somebody who is a real data collection expert, or a real analysis person, or a real ideas person, I would be able to look and see what sort of publications this person writes. And then there's a list of all my publications, and those would have, if they had been rated, their ratings next to them. So you can see how well rated by my peers my publications are. And if you clicked on those, you could see who rated me as well, because it's really important to be transparent around there. I'm very well aware that you'll be worried about people rating their mates. But transparency is the way to go, I think, on that. So if you can see who's rated me, you know, maybe I've been rated by some lots and lots of the same people that I author with, and that would be a bit of an alarm bell. So that's the kind of the basic outline of Octopus. And where it is at the moment is that we're at quite an exciting phase, because we have just completed the platform with all the features that I want to have in it before it goes live. So we've been supported by lots of fantastic people. And in addition to this, we won an award from the Royal Society. And so we've been able to build a platform that is currently working. And I'm going to try and show you. Now, excuse my slight incompetence with Teams, but I'm hoping to be able to show you live. I hope you can now see Octopus, and yes, this is brilliant. This is the working version, and I've mentioned COVID before, but the reason that we've got an example from COVID up there is I've put in examples, and I'm sharing it with research teams, multidisciplinary research teams working on COVID, because I'm hoping that it will provide a platform that will be very helpful for them doing fast turnaround work. So within Octopus, you can search publications, and you can search them by type, and where you could, you know, search them by author, you can search them by keyword, but I'll try and find some examples to show you. So when you go to a publication, you can see the publication chain. So this problem has 4 hypotheses associated with it, and you can see how many of each of the other kinds of publication are listed in those chains. So as I click through these, going from one publication to the next, you can see the chain of things associated with that publication. I'm just going to go back and find another example. Right, so as I go through, here's a short hypothesis about how it'd be a good idea to look at the difference between severe and mild COVID cases. And this goes into a case study. So the protocol is, again, quite brief, but the data and results, as you can see, are, you know, as full as they would be in any other kind of publication. And these are very easy to create. And you can see there's been a red flag. Somebody's not very happy about this publication. Potential ethical issues. You know, has there been adequate ethics around this patient giving their data? And then there's an analysis, there's an interpretation of that, and a potential clinical application of that. Now, if I wanted to write a publication that was linked to one of these, say I wanted to write a new analysis, I could log in, which I hope is going to work, yeah, which takes me to the ORCID page. Of course, now I'm live streaming, it's taking up all the bandwidth in the world. And now I'm logged in, you can see my name up there, and I can write a link to publication. I've never done this live, this is probably going to be a disaster. It asks me what publication type I want, so I can write one of the possible publications that can be linked to this. So I can write an analysis of this data, or a peer review, or I can start a whole new problem. I'll pretend I'm going to write an analysis. I won't go through this all in great detail, but I just wanted to show you how easy it is. So I can select select different authors, and I would type in their names here and it would search the ORCID database. I would give it a title. If I had some analytical code on a code sharing platform, I would share it. I would then give the funding statement. I'm going to have to write something in these just to choose a publication license. And then all I have to do is either type something in there, or I can upload a PDF or a docx. And once I've uploaded something, and I won't go through this, all I do is view the draft, edit it if I want, and then click on publish. And if I've selected other authors, they will be emailed to get them to authorize publication. And then it instantly appears within Octopus. So the whole thing can be incredibly quick. Equally, if I weren't the author of this publication, then I could rate it very quickly. Or I can even seem to be able to red flag my own publications. So the whole thing is designed to be as quick as possible, to allow you to share information, to allow you to say what you think about other people's publications. And as I said, you can go to your own page and have a look at your own publications, which those are my Octopus publications, but from ORCID it also brings out the papers that I've written outside of Octopus as well. So that's a very quick tour, and I think it's probably time to stop at that point and open up for questions, because I am really interested to hear your thoughts, and I'm sure you've got lots of questions about that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Alex. A very clear and wonderfully illustrative talk. We have a question, and it goes something like, does the protocol level describe the full intended analysis plan to be implemented in the analysis level, in addition to the experimental design?
That's a really good question. There are so many details that I didn't go into in that quick overview. And one of them is that Octopus is very much intended to be the primary research record. And I didn't really make that very clear. So yes, all details should be published in Octopus. And I won't go back to find out, but I hope that I've written that when you're writing a protocol, it would be good practice to show to devise your analytical plan as well, just as you would if you were writing a registered report. Obviously, it's not relevant for all areas of science, but yes. So just to slightly expand on that thought of the difference between the primary research record and journals. So I think that what journals and papers are doing at the moment is trying to serve too many audiences, because they are the primary research records. So you're supposed to give all details and allow things to be reproducible. But clearly, papers are also selling a story. And they're trying to be advertising, as it were, for work. And I think that's a disruptive pairing. So Octopus is designed to take away the pressure from papers to give all the details.
I wonder whether Brendan asked the question. I wonder, are you satisfied with that answer, or do you want to expand on your question? If you're still there, you can unmute if you like. If not, then we can move on.
No, that answered it very well, thank you.
Okay, perfect. We have the next question is from Julian. Julian, it's quite a mouthful, your question. Do you want to ask it verbally? Are you there, or if you're shy, I can read it out.
Yeah, I just tried to put this into one question. Basically, I very much like the setup of the platform, and I think it's a very interesting idea. Just as a researcher, I think I'm personally, and I think that's the case for many other people as well, already overwhelmed by the amount of research that's out there and to sort through. And I'm wondering whether chopping or disaggregating, I said, the sort of standard publication even further into those micro publications might just make it even more challenging for researchers to sort through the, well, I guess, publications.
I sympathize. I am also drowning in publications. And one of the things I really wanted Octopus to help do is to get around that problem, to put everything in one place and to use the best technology of the 21st century and the coming centuries to be able to search it and sort it. Obviously, in the first version that we launch, we're not going to be able to have the best searching and sorting facilities available out there because there are so many specialists in that. It is, the core work of the whole internet. But I would hope that by providing a single platform, which is digital first, everything is there in digital format, then people will be able to develop the best search technology to make the core of Octopus as easily searched and as easily accessed for whatever purposes you want as possible. And Octopus is all open source. It's designed to be using the best skills of everybody in the world who cares about science to add to it, to add modules to it, to help develop it further for the purposes that everybody needs. So obviously, I and my limited resources to start with can't put the best search facilities in it, but I would really hope that other people will be able to concentrate on that and make it work. And I do think that the helpful visualization of these chains of publications will make it much easier to see what's related to what and to find things. We could order these by rating. We've got linked problems that have come off these. I think it helps organize the research that's out there better. That's the intention anyway. And by doing it in a digital and an open source way, I'm hoping that allows the best people in the world to work on that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Julian. Joe, you have a question. It's a two-parter. Do you want to have a go at verbalizing it if you're still in the group? Want to make yourself known?
Hello. Yeah, I am still here. Thanks for that, Sam. Really great talk. Really, really interesting. I love the concept. I just wondered if you had any intention to integrate Octopus with kind of other open science materials like Open Science Framework or GitHub, just so it doesn't fragment things that researchers need to do as we progress to make science more open.
I would love it to be as integrated as possible. I've been talking with as many of those developing open science projects as possible so that we are using some kind of common languages as much as possible so that things can talk to each other. I completely agree that one of the biggest problems in open science at the moment is that there is such a multitude of, brilliant but unlinked projects, and we probably all use a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I really would like Octopus to help bring these together. So bringing together all the power of the open source, open science projects out there into one place and to stop this fragmentation. So yeah, I mean, I really hope, and I'm not a technical expert, but the technical architect who's working with me on this and works on a lot of other open science and open source pieces of software has assured me that he is making it in such a way that it talks to as many others as possible. And by being open source, of course, we allow other people to plug into it as much as possible as well.
Cool, that's really good to hear. Thank you. Just a really quick follow-up. And I think you described this, but just to be clear, can you retroactively add a paper to this software? So, for example, if I've got a preprint that I've just put out,
yeah,
can I retroactively take my hypothesis and pre-register stuff and stick it on Octopus?
Yeah, absolutely you can. So I imagine that Octopus would be used to start with like a preprint server. And in fact, the next stage, now I've got this as a working, technically all works. What we're doing now is we're taking all the open access papers that exist, and we've got a huge number from JISC. I think it's 30 million. And what we're doing is running natural language processing over them, extracting from them what the core problem that each of them was trying to tackle, and then putting those problems into Octopus to create a hierarchically linked framework of all the problems in science. And then each of those open access papers will be attached to those problems as a kind of weird non-Octopus publication type, which we won't encourage people to upload themselves, but will at least create a useful repository of the existing work in science that is open access. And from that, then I hope that will make Octopus an immediately useful resource for people to find things to start navigating, and then hopefully start adding reviews to those papers, and then publishing their own publications in Octopus style micro publications off that core of problems and existing open access papers.
That sounds very interesting and cool. So thanks very much for describing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have another question from Brendan, which is, will the micro publications be indexed on Google Scholar? I suspect this would be needed for non-Octopus familiar users to see relevant work that is listed on Octopus. Yeah,
very good question. They will have DOIs. I'm talking to JISC about that at the moment. And I have had a phone conversation with the guy behind Google Scholar, which was one of those chicken and egg situations. So basically he says he only follows the crowd. So what's listed on Google Scholar is what scholars think should be listed on Google Scholar. So I'm hoping that in a few months' time, or possibly next year, I can call him back and say, right, now how about listing things on Google Scholar from Octopus? Because we have this, this tsunami of publications that people are publishing in it, and it is becoming a core resource. That's where I'd hope to be. But yes, at least I have his phone number.
Are you happy with that answer, Brendan? Do you want to have a follow-up or anything?
No, happy with that.
Okay, cool. Does anybody else have any questions that they would like to ask Alex? If so, you can just enter them in the chat. I do have a couple of maybe comments or questions, but I think people's faith in preprint servers has been slightly shaken in the recent events with the coronavirus, where there's been a kind of deluge of, I don't know what the politically correct or diplomatic way to put it, but not very, terrible papers. And I think the absence of peer review has been the reason for why this has happened. And so, which is why I'm so sort of excited with that component of Octopus. I suppose if I turn this into a question, is there a way, could you just remind me, if you've already gone over it, whether you can rate other people's reviews? And this might put a stop on, this overly zealous favourable reviews for colleagues and so on. And how would that look?
Yes, sorry, I didn't mention it and I should have done. So yes, reviews are rated just the same way as any other kind of publication. But when I say just the same way, actually, instead of having 3 things that reviews are rated on, they only have 1 thing. They're just given a single rating. I'm trying to remember. I should be able to just go back. I have, in fact, put a test review in here. I gave somebody a very bad review, and there you go. So there's an overall rating for a review that I would be able to give if I weren't the author. So yes, and I do completely agree that putting preprints out there, I think really it shows the need for fast sharing of work. And one of the things, you know, I am quite involved in the COVID work at the moment through my day job, and there's a real lack of a platform for fast and in-depth conversation about hypotheses, you know, clinical, psychological, you know, political. We can't discuss these things openly and internationally anywhere at the moment. You know, I might have a hypothesis about how lockdown could be avoided, or how we could come to an end of lockdown. Where do I publish that at the moment? Where do I share that? Where do people tell me that it's brilliant or hopeless, or even better, say, well, it could work, but what you'd really want to do is do this and that with it? There is no platform for this discussion. And I think the current crisis is really showing up that need. And as you say, the preprint servers are not serving it. You know, it's a way of putting out work of variable quality, and also scattered all over the place. So I think Octopus could really fulfill a need. And as soon as I've got it, you know, over the next few weeks, I am going to be trying to make sure that people working in areas where it could be immediately useful are aware of it.
Wonderful. I mean, all the power to you. I think it's a wonderful initiative. We have another question from Brendan, which is, so he's asked two questions already. So please prioritize other questions. But how would retractions or corrections be dealt with? That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So you'll have seen this red flagging. I can red flag a publication, and it allows me to add a category. So I've got things like plagiarism, ethical issues, inappropriate statistics, misrepresentation, image manipulation, copyright, all of these. And then I can write a description. It says maximum characters 200. That is not supposed to be true. And that flagging immediately becomes public. So you've seen the little red flag that comes, and the author is emailed my message. And it then goes into like the eBay dispute resolution center. If within a certain length of time, the dispute has not been resolved, and all of that dispute is made public. So if I want to go into the, you know, to view the dispute resolution, I can read the dinging and donging between the author and the disputer. If after a certain length of time that isn't resolved, then the plan is that it will automatically email the relevant research office or research integrity office of the institution or national or whatever. Now, the problem with that at the moment is that in a lot of countries and institutions, they don't have a good one, or there isn't a database of them all. But that's certainly what I would plan. At the moment, it just goes into the dispute resolution between author and disputer, and only the disputer can remove the red flag if they are happy with the author's responses, which I think is at least better than how it works at the moment.
Wonderful. That's a great way to deal with it. Brendan, do you have anything to add, follow up or clarification?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. It seems Octopus would be very well placed to kind of track the ripple effect of a faked paper and how that's influenced subsequent experiments and things. Would there be a way of seeing the red flag or, you know, retracted whatever in micro publications that follow on from, say, fake data?
Oh, that's an interesting point. So you mean if somebody's published some data, it's been red flagged, but somebody else has already published an analysis, that red flag has to go down the chain? Yeah,
Yeah, not necessarily down the chain one by one. I guess you could have, say, interpretations based upon a body of data, body of analysis, and that obviously wouldn't be invalidated by just one data set tracking.
There should be a message, shouldn't there, just to say that something above this has been red flagged. You might want to just check. Yeah. That's a really good point. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Brendan. I don't know whether anybody else has anything to add. Any questions or? I
wish I could ask everybody a question, because one thing that's come, I'll raise it. I don't know how we'll gather responses, but one thing that's always coming up is that people are frightened of writing reviews under their own name, as it were. They don't like the idea of open reviewing. And I have to admit, I've written open reviews for Wellcome before, and it's a scary thing. I don't mind what people think of me because I don't have an academic career, but I don't want to make a fool of myself and criticize something that was not worthy of criticism. So one suggestion has been that everything that is published on Octopus, whatever the publication type, is published anonymously to start with. So although obviously it knows you are the author, the author name is not displayed. And that this is a golden period in which all reviews and ratings are worth more, because it's in the double blind sort of reviewing period. And if people break that golden period by, say, tweeting that this is my publication, then they lose that period where they get double points for their ratings and reviews. And then after, say, 2 months or 6 months or however long we think's a good period of time, then names come up against publications. And I think it's a really interesting idea, but I'd be curious to have any feedback on that.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody wants to dive in. I mean, it's an ongoing issue, isn't it? Whether peer review should be anonymous, and it's odd given that anonymity does free you and allows you to sort of be more candid, let's say, in your scrutiny. I recently peer reviewed a paper by Daniel Larkins that was looking at signed peer reviews, and what he found was that if given the option, reviewers would sign their review if the review was sort of favourable, or perhaps a bit light on the criticism. So if the work was good already, they would be more likely to sign it off and break that anonymity. So I wonder whether there would be a sort of disproportionate number of cases where the anonymity was broken, where the paper was good anyway, let's say, or the work was good anyway, but not necessarily for those that are more tricky to handle. I think that might complicate the situation a bit more. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I would hope that culture would eventually change, that we'll become used to politely critiquing. And if somebody's misunderstood and critiqued something, and not, all jumping on and castigating, just politely, we all make mistakes, Mm-hmm. But it's a big culture change. But the culture change can happen really fast. People often say to me, Octopus is such a big change, it'll never happen. I don't believe that. The world changes very, very fast.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I note, I mean, I'm sort of heartened by what Chris Chambers says, is that once sort of open science ethos or culture takes hold somewhere, whether it's a lab or university, it's very difficult to eradicate. So I think there will be a culture change, and I think it will be irreversible. And I think that's a really important part. When people view sort of criticism as a way to refine their work rather than a personal attack, or discrediting their work, and that's my experience anyway. When with bioRxiv, for example, where you can have comments on preprints, there's a definite shift in people's response to that. They view it as a additional support, an extra collaborator, rather than reviewer number 2 just hounding them again.
Really good to hear. Yeah.
Well, if nobody has any comments or responses to Alex, we can finish it there. But of course, do email the RIOT Science Club email at kcl.ac.uk, and then we can feed any comments or points back to Alex. But for now, if I could just all ask you to unmute yourself and then just give Alex a round of applause and just thank her for coming today. So
well, thank you very much indeed. And if I was slightly more competent, I would share with you the URL. Hang on a sec. Let me try and share. Oh no, I've lost it completely now.
Okay.
But I will. I'll send it to Sam to send around to all of you. The URL, and I'd love you to play around with Octopus and give me feedback. There is a feedback button which allows you to automatically give feedback that goes straight to the software developers, and it'd be fabulous to get your thoughts. And do feel free to email me as well.
Okay, well, we can send that round to our mailing list, absolutely, and invite feedback. Well, anyway, so thank you very much, Alex, again, and do stay safe and stay well. And I'll just stop the recording and let everybody pop off. So.